me today, I have Brett and Lydia Korn. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I found out about Brett and Lydia from our very good friend Jeff Herron, who does RCIA over at the Cathedral. And he has been feeding me names of people who have great conversion stories and who are willing to talk to me on Catholic views. And your names came through a few months ago, and he just could not say enough about you guys as a couple and as individuals coming into the church. So thank you so much for coming in to talk to us and tell us your conversion story, Brett. Lydia is a cradle Catholic.
Cradle Catholic.
Yes. So,
yep, there I am.
So a lot of this is going to focus on Brett. However, the way I understand it, I do not know the whole story, but the way I understand it, Lydia had quite a bit to do with, well, of course, she had to bear with him all the way through. So, So if you two would just start, whichever one of you wants to, just tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you grew up, family, that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah. We both grew up in Sioux Falls, so we have quite a bit of family in town here, which has been very nice as we've started having children. But we didn't meet until we were in college. So we both worked at the Country Club of Sioux Falls in the golf shop area. So that's when we met. And what year was that?
2015.
2015. So almost 10 years now.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But so yeah, do you want to?
I grew up, well, more about my faith. I grew up just cradle Catholic.
Yeah.
Went to Christ King, O'Gorman all the way through.
Okay.
And then, met Brett in college, and then we started dating and kind of started going down that pathway of if we're getting serious and stuff. And then the faith question got introduced to us. So,
yeah.
Yep.
And you have 2 kids now.
We have 2 kids now. Yep.
Okay. And you've been married since 2019 then, is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what do you do?
I'm a nurse.
Oh, nice.
Very part-time. I mostly stay home with the kids, so
That's
only
good.
a couple days a week.
That's a good thing.
Yes, thankfully.
And Brett?
And I'm a financial analyst at Northwestern Energy.
Oh, very nice.
Here. Yeah.
So I bet you're busy with kids and yeah. How old are the kids?
3.5 and 5 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yes.
you are busy.
Yeah.
Okay. So for both of you, for Brett specifically, I want to know what your relationship was like with faith before you discovered Catholicism, and maybe Lydia a little bit about what your faith was like growing up, if you would, Brett.
Yeah. So we growing up, we were very involved in the church throughout my entire life, and so it was, Sunday school and then church, and then your service, and then a lot of Sundays it was even, you go back in the evening for like a Sunday evening service, and then Wednesday night youth groups and things like that. So we were very involved in the church, and had a private education too. So I went to Sioux Falls Christian for majority of my schooling from early elementary through high school. And so faith was a very integral part of my upbringing, of my family life. My parents were very hands-on with my faith and my upbringing, and just kind of, from church to schooling, it was
all integrated.
It was all integrated, and beyond just my parents and like friends and friends' parents and things of that nature. It was a very, I would say, closely knit community of within the faith. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Lydia, what was your life growing up as a Catholic?
Just exactly what you'd expect. Went to Mass every Sunday.
Yep.
I know for a while when my parents were younger, it maybe was different, but as we got older and my sister kind of got into the faith too, my parents really spun off that. My mom started going to daily Mass, and so being, Catholic and practicing your faith was very important. And O'Gorman honestly did like an excellent job setting me up for when I went into college, like knowing my faith and like what I stood for and stuff like that. So, it was always a very, very big deal. And I mean, that was one of the first conversations I had with him when we dated. I think we'd been dating for like 2 weeks, and I told him, I was like, I just want you to know, if you're ever going to marry me, you will have to convert. And he was kind of like, okay.
He's like, sure, whatever.
Yeah, pretty much.
What was your thought when
right
she
away,
said
that was like a red flag. Like that was like a big old like gulp. Like I don't think that's gonna happen. Like and here we are. But in between then and now, a lot's happened.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Was it Lydia? Well, she's probably the catalyst, but what was the catalyst to you exploring the Catholic faith?
Yeah, Lydia kind of like gave me those initial nudges, and I was very resistant to it. And
Yeah,
Lydia
we
and
were
I
met
actually,
with a lot of,
we
Oh, yeah.
we actually separated or broke up for
Almost a
almost a
year.
year
Wow.
in college.
A little spiritual warfare going on.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much
lot,
so,
yeah.
because Lydia wasn't compromising on her faith, and I wasn't willing to compromise. And I just was meeting that with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
And the conversations that we would try to have were never.
They just didn't go anywhere.
They just didn't go
They
anywhere.
weren't productive.
Because
They were
they weren't
not.
productive.
No.
So it was after we had been dating for like a year or two, we broke up because of the religion. Kind of like we were serious about each other, but obviously with the future in mind, that was kind of big elephant
Yeah.
in the room.
Yeah.
So when we spent that, or when we broke up, that was really for me kind of a soul searching, and that's when I started to dive into church, to mass and to the Catholic Church. And because I just took it upon myself, was like, if this is going to work out with Lydia, I want to find it in my heart without like the feelings of distraction, because that was a big part of some of our butting heads, was like how I separate my feelings from like what what my spirit is telling me to do, or what this what the Holy Spirit is leading me. And he's just like just a lot of noise and a lot of confusion. So just taking that separation, and we were apart for almost an entire year. And
That seems like a really good way to do this, though, because then you didn't necessarily have the pressure of making the relationship work. You actually were willing to say, okay, I'm going to step back and explore it for myself.
Yep.
Which I think is important.
Yeah.
Was that important? Was that like a key thing for you?
Yeah, it was. And it, looking back on it, it just kind of happened that way, because I know I was probably not, I would give Lydia a lot of credit for like taking that route with the way things played out, because it wasn't like I just wanted to like step away and separate, for a while. It was like kind of I don't know. It was kind of a battle and struggle, and so it was.
I think when he even started that conversion process, then when I figured out he was doing it, it initially made me very mad, because
I can understand that.
I was like, you didn't do any of this, for me when we were dating, and after lots of time apart and us meeting back up together near the end, it was those anger feelings had subsided. But it was a lot to go through, just because I had wanted to help him through that process, but obviously it needed to go a different way.
I mean, I think we start to realize that it can't be us that does it. Like the person has to do it themselves.
Yes, 100%. And he needs to do it outside of for himself.
Right.
Yeah.
So during that year, I started to go to daily mass. I was a senior at USF in town here, so my schedule allowed that I was free over the lunch hour. So I would go to noon mass daily, and a lot of times I would be able to be there with Jeff Heron, who I got connected through. I can't remember who made that initial.
I think Father Morgan.
Oh,
maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just started to slowly, kind of start from the ground up, and just be in mass and do my own research. And I read a lot of books and did a lot of spent a lot of time in prayer. And growing up, the Bible was a big emphasis in my upbringing, and so just looking to the Bible and to the scriptures to kind of find answers that would lead me to Catholicism. I just started off with this notebook, and just the different differences between my upbringing and what Catholicism preaches, as far as the saints and Mary and the Eucharist, and just all of those, confession, all of those all of those core
awesome
differences.
things.
All those core differences, and it just like digging into my Bible and figuring out, or finding in the scriptures where that actually points to that. And that was kind of right in front of me my whole life, obviously, with being so involved in my church and the scriptures a lot. And so it was just kind of like, that's really what kind of started to build momentum for me, was when I was finding that all these things that the Catholic Church preaches are are in the scriptures, which is not something that I was taught growing up, because, my upbringing was very strong, and that, this is what we believe. And we even, got into, this is what A person believes or B person believes, and why that's wrong.
Right. Right.
And so when I started dating Lydia, I had probably negative connotations towards Catholicism, because we were taught things that, no, this is what Catholics believe, and this is why it's wrong.
Right.
So there was a lot of those hurdles that I had to jump through just in my own mind, because it was just, ingrained in me. And so.
Yeah. So I find it really interesting that you kind of started going to Mass really early on. Mass is very different from what you were used to growing up.
Yep.
What was that like for you, that switch? And were you still going to your regular service?
So I was not still going to my regular service. And I guess for me, it was initially just like the real presence, and the Eucharist was something that was always disturbing to me when I didn't understand it and didn't know what it was. And when I started praying and started to allow myself to just be open to the ideas, and it was something that really just kind of took me by storm and just hit me.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of meditation and reading in the passage of John 6 and the Bread of Life discourse, and still a passage that I rely heavily on. And I know just thinking about, coming into the presence of God, growing up, it was like, where two or more gathered in my name, I'm present, which is true, but the actual have Jesus, come down and be present. It was just something that was kind of I don't remember the exact moment, but I just hit me I'm in the presence of God right now.
Yep.
And I literally just got goosebumps, and and so I would continue. And at that time, obviously I wasn't receiving or anything.
Right.
I was not, it was just a few months in, and just the biblical background of me, I just was thinking of even just Moses in the burning bush, when he realized that he was in the presence of God, he just took off it just fell on his face, and it was just trembling. And I just kind of had that correlation of I'm in the presence of God. And so going to Mass, for the first couple of years, it was even after my conversion, I was just I was always just get goosebumps, during that part of the Mass, just because I was taking it that literally was important to me. And
it's really good for regular cradle Catholics to hear that, because we grew up with it, and
it's just what it is.
It's just there all the time, and we aren't thinking about it all the time. So converts are so helpful to us.
Very much
it's
so.
oh yeah, that is something we really need to pay more attention to. So thank you for that. So when did the two of you get back together then?
So I had not. It was probably. We were apart for about a year. So.
17. And then he came, and then I started going to the RCIA classes with him.
Okay.
And then he came into the church the spring of 2018.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So there was a year of that we had been back together, that we were able to kind of.
No, not even. Right? Well, yeah.
Kind of start building things
back.
back.
Yeah. You're right. You're right on that timeline.
And the way I understand it from Jeff is you two got engaged before you actually were confirmed into the church. Is that right? Or was it right after?
No, we got engaged. You had come into the church, and we got engaged that following
okay.
fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Easter 2018 was when it came into the church,
right.
and then in the fall. So
we got engaged.
About 6 months later, we got engaged.
Yeah.
And then the following year, we got married in the September of 2019, and then the following September, we welcomed little
Babies?
Madeline into our life.
Yeah.
What has been the most difficult thing for you, Brett? But then has there been something besides the year you were apart? Has there been anything that's been difficult, maybe family or anything like that?
Yeah, initially it was pretty divisive,
I bet.
with my family.
Yeah.
And, they obviously took it hard, and I had something that I couldn't imagine going through, with just now being a parent and thinking about, Madeline and Benjamin. And so thinking about what my parents would have gone through, at that time, and maybe still do, I guess. It was a big, there was a lot of difficult conversations that, I was thankfully able to have, with them when Lydia and I were broken up. So a lot of like the heat of my, conversion I always think about was, that time when we were separated and, when Lydia and I were getting back together, I knew that, I was going to be Catholic. So that was already kind of decided. And hopefully there was able to be a little bit of that separation as far as like, Brett's not just doing this for Lydia. Like he, did this for a year without her. But no, there was a lot of awkward.
Yeah. It probably made it easier for your parents. I mean, even though it's difficult, but easier for them knowing that it was really fully your choice and you weren't doing it for someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that difficult for you, Lydia, having that stress with the parents now? And is it better?
Now, 100%. We were even just saying, like, I feel like there's not that uncomfort and, like, discomfort, I guess. And, like, even when, like, our kids have been baptized, it's, like, not that stress. But I would say that first, like, year we kind of got back together. And when he was going through that conversion, I felt very uneasy every time I was over at their house just because I feel like
some of the tension in
there
the
was
air.
tension like there was tension in the room, and obviously I was what introduced this to him, and I'm sure when we started dating, even they're like, oh, he's dating a Catholic girl, so there was now it's totally fine, but for a while I just felt like a little bit of like a oddball out.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that.
Yes.
Brett, what was Easter Vigil like for you coming into the church? What was it like for both of you? I mean, because Lydia was your sponsor.
Yes. Yep. It was just kind of surreal because it was something that I felt like, and it had only been like a year and a half, but it just felt like it was such a long time coming because I was attending Mass so frequently during that last semester of my senior year. So, I was going every single day and just wasn't able to receive. And, that was the thing that was drawing me to Mass was the Eucharist, and I wasn't able to partake in that, obviously not being confirmed. And so that was just like a huge blessing, but it just kind of finally felt like, and this probably doesn't sound right, but it kind of felt like the finish line for a little bit. And I remember having this conversation with Jeff afterwards and like, this isn't the finish line. This is the beginning.
You just started.
Yes. And so that was maybe one of the challenges that I've just faced personally was I feel like when I went through that, that time of my conversion without Lydia and then coming into the church, it was just like there was so much like spiritual momentum that I had just built up, and I was so just like active and on fire for, reading different books and scriptures and listening to podcasts and X, Y, and Z. And then when I came into the church, I had to remind myself that this is not the end. This is the beginning.
Yeah.
And
and you got to keep that momentum going.
Yes,
don't you?
and it was difficult to keep that momentum going.
Yeah.
Just naturally, as things in your life kind of ebb and flow. It was, Yeah.
I imagine you help each other as a couple. Like, what is your faith life like now as a married couple, both Catholic? How is that? Is it a lot different than it was in the beginning? Obviously, because he wasn't Catholic.
Well, and I think even like when we were dating, if like we would like pray together, there was still like almost butting of heads because it was like, that's not how I pray and that's how you pray and stuff, you know? And so, and I think having kids introduced into the picture too now is like we're teaching Madeline, the Hail Mary and things like that, and those prayers. It's like praying with her every night is like something that's important so that she sees growing up in like a home of like, we do pray before meals. We pray every night before we go to bed, and we talk about things like that. And teaching her those things, I think, as we're like beginning to teach her about the teachings of the church, you know, on a surface level.
Right.
It's like also like, okay, how do I explain this in the best way to her so she can know? And it really does like kind of remind you like, okay, we need to make sure we know what we're telling her.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. So you have to keep learning. Yeah. I mean, you can learn your whole lifetime.
Yes. Yeah. Always.
So, yeah. What's your favorite part so far? I think I might know the answer to this.
So I didn't mention this, but history has always been a big part of, what initially kind of drew me to the church, and obviously then that pointed into the Mass and the Eucharist. So that's going to be my favorite part, hands down.
So you maybe need you're more intellectually drawn to the faith.
Yes. 100%.
Which is totally, I mean, you have to have both, intellectual and spiritual. Yes. So very good. That's kind of me too. I love the history of it. My husband's the same way. Loves to read the history of the church and so on. So do you read a lot of like church fathers in the beginning?
I have slowly kind of started to learn about, because that wasn't something that I was familiar with growing up, because obviously, Protestant Reformation was in 1500s. So anything like pre-1500s or whatever was maybe a little bit of a gray area.
Yep.
So something that was not really
there's
on
a
my
lot
radar.
there's a lot to
so
see.
Now it's,
There's a lot.
so much to unpack and learn about still. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, I have a feeling there's a lot more about your story that we probably didn't get to talk about. You seem like a very lovely couple, and I'm glad, Brett, that you came into the church all by yourself and you had that time away, because I think that's super important. And it'll make you guys better. It obviously already has better as a married couple, better with your in-laws, and just as you go forward. So really glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
In the church.
Yes. Oh.
And in the church.
Yes.
And you, like I said, converts are so great for everybody, because you have a lot of fire. Don't lose that if you can help it, and just keep studying.
Yep.
So thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If you haven't found us already on social media, you can find us at Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube at SF Diocese anytime. That's it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.